Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Texas Blockcast. We are here with Jason Less, the CEO of Riot Platforms. Jason, I'm excited to jump into this conversation with you today. Before we do, though, I would love, we have a lot of listeners who they've heard of Riot, they know of you, but they might not know your background and kind of how you got to where you are today running a large publicly traded company. Could you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. My education came through computer science. I've always been a student, passionate about computer science. However, after graduating college, university, I went a unique direction. I took all the math and strategy I learned in school and applied that to playing poker professionally, and became one of the best players in the world in the form of the game that I played in. Had that career for about 14 years or so. And it was through that career that I discovered Bitcoin, because back, you know, people talked back in the day about this theoretical use of Bitcoin, or maybe one day people need it for this, whatever. But as early as 2011, people were using Bitcoin in the poker community to move money around. So I became exposed to Bitcoin and became more and more interested over time. I was using it in my ordinary course of business. And eventually, I just became so excited about this because once I started tapping in to understanding how Bitcoin works, I truly understood how it was accomplishing these valuable properties. And even though I was aware of it for so many years, it finally just dawned on me like this is the future. And yeah, poker's fun and can make money doing that. That's an interesting lifestyle, but I want to be a part of this future. So I left poker entirely just to focus on brushing off my programming skills. I started doing development around Bitcoin again, did a lot of studying, research, involved with different groups, and set up my own mining operation. And I had no aspirations of getting a job. But when Riot became a company in 2017, I had the opportunity to join the advisory board and then the board of directors. And the company has gone through major transformation since then. And on the other side of that, when the company decided to narrow in on specifically Bitcoin and specifically Bitcoin mining, I was asked to be CEO. So that was about 2.5 years ago. And it's been quite an amazing ride.
It certainly has, and we're coming up into the next halving, and this is something that we've talked about in the Bitcoin mining world for a long time, and we're going to be talking about it again too for the next halving, right? Every 4 years, so
Mhm.
or approximately every 4 years. So this April, there is an interesting development. We all are expecting it. We know it's coming, but for the rest of the listeners or those that aren't familiar with Bitcoin mining, the Bitcoin reward will be halved. So it'll go from 6.25 to 3.175, and the efficiency of the miners will be tested. So the hash rate will either drop off a little bit, or the difficulty level, excuse me, well, which they actually move in tandem. So the hash rate
Yeah.
and the difficulty level will either drop off, or the price of Bitcoin will increase, or some combination of those two, right? Which
Right.
which do you expect? What are your analysts looking at?
Well, historically, we've seen both, and at the very first, the first order effect is always that difficulty coming down, because when the awards are getting cut in half in that first moment, because I don't think the price of Bitcoin is going to double the first moment after the halving, everyone's revenue gets cut in half. So all the less efficient operators out there with less efficient machines, higher power costs, higher operating costs, they will just not be profitable. So historically, we've seen a 20 to 30% drop in the difficulty right after the halving. So that's a little bit of reprieve that you get as a efficient miner right off the bat, assuming nothing happens with the price. And that's one of the reasons that we focus so much on being on that left end of the cost curve, on being one of the lowest cost producers, so we can make it through different challenging times, such as immediately when a halving happens. Historically, we have seen the price of Bitcoin rise quite dramatically in the 6, 12, 18 months following a halving. Now, I think there's strong arguments that that has been during different macro environments and zero interest rate environments, and that very well may not, take place for the halving reason alone in the future. but there are other major catalysts out there that may cause the price to rise. We have a lot of positive progress on ETFs. I think we're inching towards regulatory clarity in different areas, which I think would be a positive catalyst. So while it may not be the halving itself that causes a increase in price of Bitcoin in the future, the fact is these other positive developments are happening. Bitcoin continues to grow in adoption and use by individuals and institutions. So, we're bullish on the long-term price of Bitcoin, although I couldn't tell you how that's going to play out exactly.
Well, nor can I.
Yeah.
But that is a very great explanation. I think going to be helpful for people who are wondering how the mining world is going to react to this. And I tend to agree with you that we will see a difficulty level adjustment downwards. I do think, though, this may be a little bit of a hot take, that the ETF will get approved before the halving. So I think we'll have a little bit of price action. They have to respond to BlackRock by February, I believe.
Yep.
Grayscale.
Yep. So that's an interesting dynamic. And let's contrast that to the prior halving in 2020 when we had COVID come through. So it was already tough for Bitcoin mining economics leading into the halving. And at the same time, the price got decimated around then. And maybe we'll see the other side of it this time, that pre-halving something really positive happens.
We can always hope.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing, though, that all these analysts are working on this and no one really knows.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you said most efficient miner. We're talk about the efficiency process. What goes into it? Obviously, we have power. We have different operational metrics. We saw that not Blockworks, but Nishant's group, the Miner Mag, came out with some data recently showing around 2,260 megawatts of Bitcoin mining in Texas. That jives really well with our number. Our number is just slightly over that at 2,290 megawatts of Bitcoin mining in Texas, which is 54% of the total in the U.S. So previously, everyone thought that like Georgia had all this Bitcoin mining, but that was just because they were looking at Foundry Pool and misinterpreting the pool data. So Nishant has gone through and done some great analysis showing 54% of all mining in the U.S. is in Texas. Riot is 100% in Texas. Go into a little bit of the detail as to why Texas is attracting so much miners and so many miners, and why you guys have invested so heavily here in Texas.
Yeah, I think Texas is undoubtedly the Bitcoin mining capital of the United States. And I think that's a great thing. And from Riot's perspective, that's for a number of reasons. At a very high level, Texas has a reputation of being an amazing jurisdiction to do business. Texas is a business-friendly environment. And that's why we see so many in other industries moving to Texas in general. Texas is a great place to do business. Beyond that, the leaders, the lawmakers, the policymakers here in Texas understand Bitcoin. One of the great things we see at the Texas Blockchain Council's event every year is these high big name politicians, Senator Cruz, Senator Lumpus, et cetera, out there talking about the benefits of Bitcoin. And you can see that through all different leadership positions within Texas. So not only is Texas a business-friendly state, it's a Bitcoin-friendly state because the values of Bitcoin, freedom, individual sovereignty, et cetera, I think very much resonate with the Texas community, with the good old Texan values that we see here. Finally, the power market is deregulated here in Texas, and that allows us to get not only access to power, but participate in different programs that exist in the ERCOT grid that help us drive a low-cost production, but have the simultaneous effect of helping balance grid stability. Bitcoin mining is a load that is interruptible. It can be turned off really at any time, and by being in a grid where there are market indicators of what's going on, and we have the ability to respond when the grid is stressed and additional capacity is available, that results in a win-win relationship where we're able to keep low cost of production and the grid is able to have maximum load when maximum demand exists.
Right. Let's dive in one step further to that. So recently there was an article in CNBC about Riot's participation in ancillary services. And I think there's a few data points that the headline missed So
Hmm.
you guys have published some corrections and some things that would help alleviate that. But for those that may not have seen those corrections, let's walk through some of the data points and some of the nuance that really brings to light how Bitcoin miners are benefiting the grid and not just taking from the grid.
Yeah. So a little bit of sensationalist headlines. A story got missed a little as different media outlets were reporting on some of our recent results. But basically, we I tell people the first order of positive influence that we have on the ERCOT grid here is by entering into long-term power agreements. What that does is provide predictability to the power market that there's going to be a buyer of power. That helps incentivize more generation development. That helps incentivize baseload generation. It helps incentivize renewable generation because they know there is a predictable buyer of their service in the market. And that's not unlike many other industries. If you're selling some widget and someone's going to buy that widget every day nonstop for the next 10 years, that really helps your economic profile. It helps you expand your business and brings other participants in and drives more competition. So because we have invested in Bitcoin mining, because we are long-term believers in what we're doing, we can make that commitment to buy power all the time. And not all buyers of power can do that because you're making a serious financial commitment to do that. We're committing financial resources. We're putting down deposits. We're committing ourselves to bilateral collateral requirements. It is a major financial commitment, but because of our Bitcoin vision, because of our long-term belief in what we're doing, we're able to do that. So that's the first order effect that we're having a positive influence. We are a predictable buyer. Now, the other way I think the story's gotten a little messed up when it's told is we're not getting any special treatment whatsoever, which is great about Texas. You show up, it is a marketplace of participants. We have a power purchase agreement, but the fixed part of our power, we have procured in an open marketplace of power. These blocks, these hedges of power, they're being traded. There's various counterparties. We pick these up on the market like any industrial large load of power is going to be able to do. Now, once we have these fixed blocks of power, we're able to do a couple key things, and then a third benefit that we have to the grid as well. The first thing we can do is manual curtailment. And what that means is when we see that the market price of power is high, which is a market indicator that the demand is high and supply is short, we can turn off our power. Now, we are then benefiting from the spread in the price between what our fixed power contract is and what the market price of power is at that time. Our counterparty for that is our retail electric provider. It's not, the ERCOT grid. The state is not paying for this. Our counterparty is the other financial player that we've entered into this agreement with. The second thing we're able to do with these fixed power contracts is participate in something called ancillary services. In ancillary services, we are giving ERCOT the right to control our load. And that's a very key tool that ERCOT has in order to balance grid frequency, because they don't just want, they're not just looking for loads to be price responsive. They're trying to control frequency, and that may not always be because of price. So by giving ERCOT the ability to control our load, we are giving the grid operator the right to turn us off as they need to balance, everything they're doing. This is another very large market in Texas. In fact, I think that there's about $1 billion in ancillary services fees that are paid, and we're a very small part of that. So if you break out our recent our announcement of our August results, we had about $24 million that we made through our manual curtailment part of the strategy, where that's us benefiting from the spread in our hedge with our retail electric provider when the price is high, and we're reducing our load because the grid is in high demand. And then we had 7.4 million, which is from the ancillary services, a very small portion of the overall ancillary services program in ERCOT.
Less than 1%, I think.
Less than 1%. And both of those things help stabilize the grid, help keep prices down. We are a seller driving prices down, and helps make additional capacity available when the grid is in high demand. And the final thing we do is participate in ERCOT's 4CP, 4 coincidental peak program, where when the notice comes out that it's a potential 4CP window, we just shut off our load entirely.
That's amazing. I
Yep.
think as the data trickles out and as we're able to provide elected officials, staffers, journalists with the right visualizations of that data, this is not easy to comprehend. I mean, you and I,
Yeah.
we live this, we work this on a daily basis for the last several years. The average consumer will spend about 30 seconds thinking about it. So we have a while before we're going to convince them. But for a staffer or elected official you can look at it for about 30 minutes or so, who actually can dig into the details a little bit more, we have a very strong chance to demonstrate, because the data is on our side. The more they
Right.
look at the data, the more that they will realize that large flexible loads like Bitcoin miners are imperative, especially on grids that have high renewables penetration. Texas is a third renewable. We have a
Right.
lot of wind and solar here. So if we have a third of our generation that is renewable and is intermittent, we need to have some flexibility on the load side. So appreciate you clearing up some of those misconceptions with that headline. Let's now dive into what's next. We know that just south of where I am here in Dallas, you guys have a site that's being constructed. And from what I have read in the public, or in the what I've read on the internet, I'll just say,
Sure.
is that this is going to be MicroBT is going to put in some of their latest model machines in this Corsicana site. It's going to be almost all immersion. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're really excited about this new site in Corsicana, Texas, which is about 2 hours away from our existing site in Rockdale, Texas. Our site in Rockdale, Texas has a capacity of 700 megawatts. It's the largest site in the United States, North America. I'm pretty sure it's the largest site in the world, but the rest of the world is kind of a black box. And the new site we're building in Corsicana is even bigger. And when we've approached the site, we've come at it, when we built the Rockdale site, it was over a different time period. We're taking that one step at a time. Now, as the company has grown and we've been able to commit to our vision, and we have grown in resources, this new site we're building exactly how we want from scratch. And this site has a 1 gigawatt capacity, and we've begun our first phase of it is 400 megawatts, but we have built out largely a lot of the infrastructure and planning that's going to be needed to accommodate that eventual capacity. It is all immersion cooling. Immersion cooling, for the listeners who don't know, is taking electronics, in this case it's mining hardware, and submerging it in a dielectric fluid that does not conduct electricity, but keeps that equipment operating at cooler temperatures than you would be able to achieve by just bringing in ambient air with fans over it. That allows us, well, one, the machines operate in a cooler environment. They operate in a more stable environment. This helps prolong the lifespan of the machines and reduces the noise almost entirely because there's no fans running. This is all submerged in fluid. To fill our immersion infrastructure, as you noted, Lee, we've signed a long-term purchase agreement with MicroBT to bring in their mining hardware designed specifically for immersion cooling. In this case, it's the M56 model, and it's amongst the most efficient hardware that's out there right now. And we recently have a long-term agreement, but just signed an order from that agreement to fill our first 2 buildings with that hardware. Another great thing about this is this hardware by MicroBT is being manufactured here in the United States, which really falls into the theme of how we've operated as a company. We are a U.S. Bitcoin company. We have entirely our operations in the state of Texas, and now to source from a manufacturer here in the United States keeps us on that theme and really helps us reduce a lot of the logistics risks that you would historically see in Bitcoin mining, having to bring miners over from Asia, renting planes and leasing planes, all sorts of customs and all of that. Now we can put miners on a truck in Pennsylvania and send them straight to Texas, keeping it all in the USA, and that's the way we like it.
That's awesome. Okay, let's dispel a few other areas of kind of uncertainty, or in the Bitcoin world, we call it FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There are those that think that Bitcoin mining sites are emitting pollution into the air simply by having these operations running. So as you and I both know, Bitcoin miners emit zero Scope 1 emissions, right? These machines do use electricity, and sometimes there are emissions that are used from that, the generation of that electricity, kind of upstream of where it gets used. But talk about the noise issues, especially with immersion. You're really cutting that out. Talk about like the pollution, the potential pollution. I mean, it's really non-existent, but people don't understand that. Do you guys have studies done? Have you been able to demonstrate that to the local communities?
Yeah, so the New York Times, amongst other critics in the past, have talked about the carbon emissions of Bitcoin mining. Of course, these machines do not emit carbon emissions. Okay, and so right now we're talking about
It's
Scope 1
just
emissions.
straight air that comes through them.
It's just straight
You
air.
can
So
breathe it just as well as you can breathe the air we're breathing now.
exactly. So Riot's VP of Research, Pierre Richard, did a study on this to confirm that, we have a video out on this to confirm that, in fact, there's not emissions coming out of these machines. They're just fans blowing air, just like your computer at home does not emit carbon. These machines do not emit carbon. So as you noted, the criticism comes from the Scope 2 emissions, and that, which is, what is the carbon footprint of the generation sources. I think this is another case where it is Bitcoin mining is being selectively targeted just to attack it on this front, because you don't see other uses of energy being looked at this way. For example, I don't know if you have. I've rarely heard anyone talk about the carbon emissions of electric cars. I hear people talk about electric cars as how they're reducing carbon emissions. Of course, they're using energy as well, which is going to have some type of carbon output. There's also been a criticism when you look at people who have criticized Bitcoin mining for its Scope 2 emissions. They try to claim that it's 95, 99% carbon under some crazy math that doesn't hold up to any scrutiny, which is why they've never published it. In fact, we're just buying energy from the ERCOT grid, which we talked about earlier. The largest supplier of wind power in the nation, solar growing tremendously. About 1/3 of this energy is renewable at any given time, and that's one of our energy source. That's the grid that we're buying from. So Bitcoin miners are just like any other electrical energy buyer. We're buying from the grid, and I think it's important to look at energy consumption and use and analyze it that way. These machines do not emit any carbon as much as your computer, your electric vehicle, or a traditional data center emits any CO2. We buy energy from the grid, and it's one of the greenest grids in the United States.
Exactly. 17 times more renewable energy is generated in Texas than is generated in Elizabeth Warren's home state of Massachusetts. So
that is a good data point right there.
The largest wind energy state in the nation, and very soon, probably even this year, actually surpassing California on the solar front as well.
Solar is exploding like crazy. 3 years ago, solar was a rounding error when you looked at the fuel mix on the ERCOT grid, and it has been performing exceptionally strong, especially during this past summer. And for the various incentives and the fact that just environmentally, Texas has high potential for solar capacity, we are really seeing that explode here.
Agreed. Okay, one other thing that we need to dispel: the water usage for these facilities. There is water that is used for these facilities, but I think when people think of water being used in industrial processes, they think of runoff or things that have like traces of different metals or things like that in the water. Help dispel a little bit about the water that is used to cool these machines, whether that's in the immersion process or in the air cool, because sometimes they're used evaporative. We use evaporative cooling.
Yeah.
Help us, the audience, understand why that water is being put back into the ecosystem or into the environment in the same exact way that it was taken out, with no additional pollutants or any sort of industrial waste mixed in with it.
Yeah, I'm glad we have an opportunity to talk about that. For both, either using evaporative cooling walls for air cooling or using immersion cooling, we're effectively using water in the same way. It is being sprayed over to, cool ambient air that's coming in. So that water is just being evaporated, back into the environment. As you noted, there's no wasteful process. It's not being combined. We're not, jump running water through some industrial thing. We're just simply bringing in water, spraying it, like is done in many evaporative cooling applications in other industries besides Bitcoin mining, and that evaporates back into the environment. So I think, as you noted, a little bit of FUD around that, not really the harmful impact that many have talked about.
So what we really see is when the community gets a Bitcoin mine, and I've talked to several county judges that would come on the show and feel, would say the same thing. There's very little impact to sort of the environment that mine gets placed in, that specific geography. They're not seeing any air pollution. They're not seeing any water pollution. The only thing with a air-cooled mine is there is a little bit of noise pollution. There's a little bit of noise that comes along with it. But as you mentioned, this Corsicana site is all immersion. So there will be zero noise pollution there in Corsicana. What you're really seeing then is, on the flip side of that coin, you're seeing jobs. You're seeing tax revenue. You're seeing pretty much everything that you would see from Amazon building or AWS or Microsoft Azure or Digital Realty or some big data center company putting a data center in their community. The only real difference is one is being used to secure a monetary network that's bringing financial sovereignty to people all around the world, and the other is being used for people to look at more Instagram photos or whatever people do on Amazon, AWS, or Facebook's data centers. So it really comes down to a subjective question around the value of those things for society, doesn't it?
Yeah. Bitcoin, through Bitcoin mining, has a very productive use of energy. I think that's a very important point to make, is the energy that's used in the Bitcoin mining goes into driving consensus and security for this free and open financial network that provides financial inclusion and sovereignty for Texans, for Americans, and for people all over the world. Just like the internet has transformed the way we exchange information and communicate by using the energy, Bitcoin is doing the same for money and finance. I think it's really important to understand that Bitcoin mining is really not that dissimilar to any other type of data center. If you're thinking about it conceptually, yes, it's designed differently. We use different types of machines, etc. But ultimately, it is another data center that is accomplishing something, a different type of application than what other data centers are trying to do. And as you noted, we have the opportunity to come in to rural communities, because what we're really going after is stranded power capacity. And in the areas that we operate in our Rockdale facility, there's no concern about noise pollution. I can't speak to every mining facility in Texas, but these facilities are typically far away from anyone who's living, working, operating. They're in the middle of more rural areas where they're not disturbing anyone. They're taking advantage of surplus power. But what we're able to do by doing that is bring a lot of jobs into these communities that might not otherwise have these major industries come in. Because Bitcoin mining is agnostic to the location it operates at, and because we're going after that surplus power, we're going after where this infrastructure has been abandoned. And in the case of our Rockdale facility, this was a community formerly had Alcoa aluminum smelting plant, formerly had aluminum generation facility, and one of those communities where the entire city kind of operated around those businesses being there. And when they left, that had a very big impact. And Bitcoin mining is the type of industry that can come in and revitalize that community and bring jobs, support schools and support the community through the economic activity that's going on there. So I believe we've had a very positive impact on the Rockdale community. I think the people that we work with there, the county judge, et cetera, certainly vouch for that. We've created over 200 jobs in that area, and we are replicating that successful formula out in Corsicana. we are recruiting from that community. We're building up our employee base there. And I think when complete, that community is going to be very proud of the high quality facility that we've built and the contribution it's having, to the world and through the community that surrounds it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty soon, right, it's going to surpass 500 employees. Is that right?
Yes, all in. I was talking there about our on the ground operations employees, but you combine our corporate employees as well. Also, we have our largest office out in Round Rock, Texas. And then we also operate our own electrical engineering and manufacturing division. All in, Riot employs over 500 people right now.
That's incredible. That's a huge,
Yeah.
huge number of people.
And when I became CEO, that number was less than 10. So there's been, there's a number of acquisitions here, but I think it's, important to highlight how much job creation has been undertaken as a result of Bitcoin, as a result of Bitcoin mining, and a trajectory we're certainly expecting to continue as we continue to grow and expand our operations.
And not only the jobs that you guys have, and of course, we estimate based upon some third-party studies that over 2,000 jobs have been created across Texas in Bitcoin mining, but 20,000 jobs have been created in a sort of an indirect way. So contractor type jobs or jobs that were created in the community as a result of that investment or injection of cash to whether that's through tax revenue or through services that were purchased by the Bitcoin miner in the community. So massive impact when you look at the third order effects of 20,000 new jobs in Texas in rural communities. And these counties are some of the smallest counties by population in Texas, 254 counties in Texas. And Bitcoin miners are the number one or number two employer in 3 counties in Texas. And they're in the top 5 in several other additional counties, especially in West Texas. So I think you guys are the top employer in Milam County now.
Yep, that is correct. We are the top employer in Milam County.
Yeah.
And Navarro County has some pretty big industry in it already. A couple of household classics there, but we'll see what happens as we grow and expand.
Yeah, it's harder to be the top employer in a county like Navarro County that has a large population. But some of these smaller counties, they're like 10,000, 20,000 people that live in the county.
Yep.
And so if you bring in 100 jobs, 200 jobs, you can pretty quickly become the largest employer. Okay, last thing I'll ask you, Jason. Well, first of all, I want to thank Riot for their participation in the Texas Blockchain Council Summit. We're renaming it the North American Blockchain Summit. Riot has come in as a big sponsor this year, as you guys have been every year for this event. And we're really excited about that. What are you most excited about in the next, say, year? And whether that's maybe cutting the ribbon there at the Corsicana site, the halving, what have you most excited?
Yeah, I am the most excited about our Corsicana facility. This is something that we've been working on for a long time. We have made a number of accomplishments in upscaling our operations to do this. We talked about the MicroBT relationship earlier and bringing that manufacturing more in the United States. So having this all come together, having the world's largest immersion cooling facility come online is something that we're particularly excited about. And I'll tell you the other thing that I'm looking forward to is people more understanding Bitcoin and how Bitcoin mining works. And I think the North American Blockchain Summit, which I think is a great idea on the rebranding, because you go to that event and just people from all over Bitcoin mining are there because it's this amazing and large event. So rebranding the name there definitely makes sense. But I think we as an industry have the responsibility and have the work cut out for us to communicate and educate what we do and why Bitcoin mining is beneficial to the grid, and dispelling a lot of these rumors as we've done on this podcast. And that responsibility falls on companies like Riot, and then through our participation groups like the Texas Blockchain Council. The summit is a great opportunity for that. I think I've always been very impressed with the lawmakers there, the policymakers that we have there, and the understanding of what we do. But there's still a lot of work to do, and I think that benefits all of us. And that's a challenge that we're looking forward to taking on here.
Awesome, Jason. Thanks for coming on the show. Where can people find you on Twitter and find out more about Riot?
So, best place to find out things about Riot on our website, www.riot.inc or riotplatforms.com. You follow us on Twitter at Riot Platforms. We post a lot of video content, links to our YouTube channel. We're putting out material all the time. So, following Riot Platforms on Twitter, I'm sorry, now called X, definitely the best place to get content. I myself, I'm also on Twitter at JasonLess_ at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Thank you, Lee.
Hey, it's Amy. Click over here to subscribe, click over here for more content, and we'll see you next time.